The 2025 Group of Seven summit began under a clear Alberta sky, the crisp morning air carrying a sense of anticipation and tension in equal measure. But the diplomatic atmosphere was far from certain. The world's eyes were fixed on Alberta, and every move would be scrutinized by a global audience hungry for both progress and drama. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, the host of this high-stakes gathering, knew the world was watching. His reputation as a skilled negotiator and economic thinker was on the line, and expectations were sky-high. His first task was to greet U.S. President Donald Trump, a leader known for his unpredictable nature and headline-grabbing style. Carney chose a path of careful diplomacy, starting with a warm and personal touch, hoping to set a positive tone for the days ahead. He wished President Trump a happy birthday, a simple gesture designed to build goodwill and break the ice. The moment was small, but it resonated, signaling a willingness to find common ground. Carney's primary goal was to keep the summit focused on urgent global problems, steering the conversation away from distractions and toward meaningful action. The war between Israel and Iran was escalating dangerously, and economic tensions were high. The world economy teetered on the edge, and the threat of further instability loomed large over the proceedings. The Canadian leader was determined to prevent the meetings from being sidetracked by personal politics or old rivalries. He knew that only a united front could hope to address the crises at hand. His approach was a delicate balance, showing respect to the American president while maintaining firm control over the summit's direction. Every gesture, every word was carefully chosen to keep the dialogue productive. This initial interaction was a masterclass in modern diplomacy, blending personal warmth with strategic intent. Carney used a combination of flattery and firm leadership to steer the powerful group toward its intended purpose, reminding them of the stakes and the need for unity. The entire world saw how a host nation's leader must manage not just global crises, but also the powerful personalities at the table. The choreography of diplomacy was on full display. With conflicts raging and economies on edge, the G7 leaders needed to project an image of unity and strength. The symbolism of their togetherness was as important as the substance of their talks. Prime Minister Carney's strategy was designed to create the best possible environment for that to happen, orchestrating every detail to foster trust and collaboration. He aimed to build a foundation of mutual respect before the leaders entered the closed-door sessions, knowing that personal rapport could make or break the negotiations. His careful welcome was more than just a formality. It was a calculated move to set the tone for honest dialogue and difficult decisions. It was the first crucial step in trying to guide a divided group of leaders toward a common purpose, a reminder that even in times of crisis, diplomacy begins with human connection. Ensuring the summit would be remembered for its substance, not its spectacle, was Carney's unspoken mission. The stakes could not have been higher, and the world waited to see if Carney's opening gambit would pay off. Just before the official G7 meetings were set to begin, anticipation was high, and the atmosphere was tense. World leaders and their teams were making final preparations, expecting a day of carefully choreographed diplomacy. But President Trump, never one to stick strictly to the script, broke from the planned schedule in dramatic fashion. Instead of heading straight into the summit, he stopped to speak with the assembled international press, turning what was meant to be a brief greeting into a full-blown, unscheduled press conference that caught everyone off guard. The president began taking questions on a wide range of subjects, shifting the summit's focus away from the carefully prepared agenda and onto his own priorities. He spoke at length about Russia's exclusion from the G7, the ongoing tensions in the Middle East, and the intense conflict between Israel and Iran, offering his own controversial takes. President Trump's remarks brought a wave of unpredictability to the summit's opening moments, leaving both allies and rivals uncertain about what would come next. He openly questioned the G7's long-standing decision to keep Russia out of the group, suggesting that the world's problems couldn't be solved without Moscow at the table. His powerful and often provocative statements pulled the spotlight away from the collective goals of the G7, making him the center of attention. The press gathering quickly became a platform for President Trump to broadcast his personal views and grievances to a global audience, ensuring his message would dominate headlines. He doubled down on his aggressive trade policies, stating his firm belief in using tariffs as a primary tool in negotiations, and warning that the U.S. would not back down from tough economic stances. The spontaneous and unfiltered nature of his statements created an extremely challenging environment for Prime Minister Carney, who was tasked with keeping the summit on track. This sudden shift in events put the Canadian host in a difficult position, forcing him to adapt quickly and manage the fallout from Trump's unexpected remarks. Instead of a calm and orderly start, the G7 was launched into a whirlwind of headlines and a media frenzy, all driven by President Trump's off-the-cuff remarks and unpredictable style. The other world leaders looked on, their own carefully crafted agendas momentarily pushed aside as they tried to gauge how to respond to Trump's bold moves. The unscheduled press conference served as a stark reminder of how one leader's actions could instantly change the dynamics of an international summit, setting the tone for what would be an unusually turbulent G7. During his impromptu press session, President Trump stood before a crowd of reporters, fielding questions on a range of pressing global issues. President Trump made a series of stunning claims that quickly captured the attention of both the media and world leaders. He argued that the major wars happening around the globe, including the ongoing conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East, would not have started if he were still the US president, suggesting his leadership would have deterred such escalations. He pointed directly at the decision to remove Russia from what was then the G8, blaming this move for increasing global instability and suggesting it was a critical mistake by Western leaders. In another surprising statement, he suggested he would be open to including China in the group in the future, a move that would dramatically reshape the balance of power within the organization. On the subject of US domestic policy, President Trump launched a sharp attack on his successor, President Biden, focusing on immigration and border security. He claimed that millions of people had crossed the border into the United States illegally, painting a picture of a crisis that he argued was being ignored or mishandled by the current administration. By raising these issues, he brought a deeply divisive American political battle directly onto the international stage of the G7 summit, forcing other leaders to respond to US domestic controversies. Turning to the Middle East, President Trump addressed the escalating conflict between Israel and Iran with a tone of grave seriousness, warning of the potential for even greater instability if the situation was not managed carefully. His remarks on these highly sensitive global security issues were made just as the leaders of the world's most powerful economies were gathering to discuss these very same topics, highlighting the urgency and complexity of the moment. The content of Trump's statements sent ripples through the diplomatic gathering, prompting hushed conversations and visible reactions among the assembled leaders. It was a clear demonstration of his America First approach, where his own priorities and perspectives took precedence over the established agenda, leaving a lasting impression on both allies and adversaries alike. As President Trump continued to field questions from the press, Prime Minister Mark Carney saw that the summit was at risk. The official schedule was slipping away, and the focus was drifting far from the agreed-upon agenda. Acting decisively in his role as the G7 chair, Carney stepped forward. He politely but firmly interrupted the press session, making it clear that it was time to stop the questions. Carney's intervention was a deliberate and necessary move. He acted to prevent the entire summit from being derailed by controversy before it had even formally started. By cutting the press interaction short, he reasserted his authority as the host and leader of the meeting. This action was not just about managing time, it was a form of diplomatic discipline. It sent a clear message to everyone present that the agenda agreed upon by all 7 nations would be the day's top priority. Prime Minister Carney was praised for bringing the situation under control and restoring order. The summit was back on track, thanks to the host's timely and courageous intervention. A dark shadow hung over the G7 summit in Alberta, the rapidly worsening conflict between Israel and Iran. Tensions in the Middle East had reached a boiling point, and this crisis became a primary concern for the world leaders. The situation was so critical that it dominated the early conversations. In response to the crisis, the G7 leaders managed to speak with one voice. They worked together to issue a powerful joint statement. The sheer urgency of the situation in the Middle East had a direct and powerful impact on the summit's proceedings. The need to formulate a collective response to the escalating crisis became a dominant theme in every discussion among the leaders. The G7's response demonstrated the group's essential role in addressing immediate and dangerous threats to global peace and stability. The focus on the Iran-Israel conflict showed that in today's interconnected world, a regional crisis can instantly become a global one. In a move that surprised many, President Trump announced he would be leaving the G7 summit in Canada a full day earlier than planned. His decision to cut his trip short was directly linked to the escalating crisis between Israel and Iran. This sudden departure introduced a new level of uncertainty and disruption into the summit. President Trump's decision to leave early underscored the extreme gravity of the Middle East crisis. His departure left the other world leaders to continue their discussions without the presence of the US president. The early exit raised serious questions about the progress that could be made on the remaining items on the G7 agenda. His empty chair was a powerful symbol of the challenges facing the summit. The summit, which had begun with a tense but controlled atmosphere, was now fractured. Despite the drama and disruptions, the G7 summit did manage to address several other major global challenges. Beyond the immediate crisis in the Middle East, the ongoing wars in Ukraine and Gaza were central to the leaders' discussions. Another significant point of debate was the economic strain caused by U.S. tariffs on goods from other countries. One of the few concrete achievements announced during the summit was a new bilateral trade deal between the United States and the United Kingdom. The G7 leaders made a concerted effort to present a united front on key security issues. However, President Trump's differing views on other matters revealed the cracks in their unity. The summit became a showcase of the constant struggle to find consensus among the world's leading economies. Ultimately, the summit highlighted both the potential and the limitations of the G7. While the G7 summit produced a unified statement on Iran and saw a new trade deal between the US and the UK, many critical issues were left unresolved. The core disagreement over the US tariffs on steel and aluminum was not settled. President Trump, before his departure, reaffirmed his strong belief in using tariffs as a primary negotiating tool. President Trump's early departure cast a long shadow of uncertainty over the discussions he missed. The summit in Canada was, in the end, a clear reflection of a world grappling with multiple, overlapping crises at once. The fact that the G7 could issue any joint statements at all showed a shared commitment to diplomacy. However, the long list of unresolved issues proved that finding common ground is becoming harder than ever before. The summit ended not with a sense of complete resolution, but with a clear picture of the challenges ahead. The 2025 G7 summit in Alberta will be remembered as a meeting of stark contradictions. It was a place where moments of unity existed right alongside deep divisions. The leaders successfully came together to issue a strong, unified warning to Iran. This collective stance was a powerful display of diplomatic cooperation. However, this unity was fragile and did not extend to other critical areas. The summit was also defined by its disagreements, particularly on economic policy. The unresolved conflict over U.S. tariffs continued to create friction between the United States and its closest allies. The summit was a microcosm of a more turbulent and less predictable world order. It ended with more questions than answers, leaving the world to wonder about the future of global cooperation.